I was sitting on the edge of the old leather sofa, nervously tapping my fingers against my knees, trying not to let the heat in my chest show. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a comforting mix that made my heart ache in ways I didn't expect. Across the room, she stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the city lights. She was impossibly captivating, more than I'd imagined when I first thought I could impress her. Her name was Marissa. She was in her mid-40s, graceful and confident in a way that made the air around her feel alive. She laughed with a kind of warmth that softened everything sharp about the world. And yet, there was a subtle vulnerability in her eyes, the kind that whispered she had been hurt before, that she guarded herself carefully. I, at 24, felt unprepared to navigate all that complexity, but somehow, my heart refused to step back. I couldn't stop watching her, the way her hand brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gentle curve of her smile when she caught me staring. My friends had teased me endlessly, claiming I was chasing a fantasy. She's way out of your league. They'd laughed, nudging me like I didn't know what I was doing. And I had told them, full of that reckless, youthful bravado, that I could do better than any of her past lovers. But now, in the quiet of her living room, the bravado felt like a flimsy shield, and my pulse betrayed me every time she looked my way. Marissa walked slowly toward the kitchen, and I caught the faint scent of her perfume, a soft, floral note that made my chest tighten. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make her laugh or at least notice me in a way that mattered. But the words lodged in my throat, and I settled for a shy smile, hoping it conveyed what I couldn't articulate. "Do you like wine?" she asked, her voice casual but somehow intimate, as though every word carried a hidden invitation. "Yeah," I said, though my voice sounded foreign to me, rough around the edges with nerves. She poured a glass for herself, then one for me, her fingers brushing mine briefly. That touch, brief and unassuming, sent an electric shiver through me. I wanted to tell her everything, that I admired her strength, that I wanted to hold her and make her laugh until the city outside blurred into nothing. But I kept quiet, letting the tension build, enjoying the dangerous pull between us. We talked about mundane things at first, the weather, her favorite books, but there was an undercurrent, a charged current of emotion I could feel with every glance, every half-smile. She laughed at something I said, and the sound wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I felt seen, noticed, in a way that made my chest ache with longing. And then, without warning, the quiet moment shattered. A sharp, insistent ding echoed through the apartment. The doorbell. We froze. Her eyes met mine, wide and questioning, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to slow. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I could swear the city outside had disappeared. Something told me this moment, this fragile, beautiful connection, was about to be tested, and that everything I thought I knew about love and courage was about to be rewritten. The doorbell's echo still lingered in my ears when Marissa finally moved toward the door, her expression a careful mask of composure. I wanted to stop her, to insist she let me see who it was first, but some part of me knew that would only make things awkward. So I stayed frozen on the sofa, nursing my glass, stealing glances at her, the way her shoulders tensed for a fraction of a second, betraying the calm she was trying to maintain. Marissa had lived through enough heartbreak to know the rhythm of caution. I could see it in the way she hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Once, she told me over coffee that she'd trusted too easily in the past, that she'd loved a man who never really saw her. That vulnerability made her guarded now, yet it didn't make her cold. She was still capable of deep warmth, laughter, and quiet intimacy. I wanted to be the one she allowed herself to trust, but I wasn't naive enough to think she'd hand that over easily. As for me, I carried the reckless optimism of youth, but my own past wasn't free from scars. I had loved and lost in ways that left bruises I didn't like to admit, mostly because they reminded me how fragile people could be when they opened themselves fully. And yet, somehow, Marissa made me feel alive in a way no one else had. Every word, every glance carried a weight I couldn't ignore, a pull I shouldn't allow myself to follow, but I did anyway. It was risky. Everyone would have called it wrong. The age gap alone was enough to raise eyebrows. Some part of me worried about gossip, judgment, even my own hesitation. And I could tell she worried, too. But here we were, two people orbiting a gravity we couldn't resist, leaning toward one another despite the unspoken complications. I tried to push away the thoughts of what-ifs and should-Is, but they clung stubbornly. I imagined a future with her, the quiet mornings, the laughter, the small shared rituals that made ordinary life feel extraordinary. And I also imagined the consequences. Whispers behind our backs, disapproval, the sting of disapproval from friends who didn't understand why a man in his 20s would be drawn to a woman who had decades of experience ahead of him. Still, as she returned to the living room, the tension between us thick and unspoken, my chest tightened. Marissa's eyes flicked toward mine, and in that look, there was recognition, a mutual acknowledgement that we both knew the risks, and yet we couldn't stop. She sat across from me, her fingers brushing against mine almost accidentally, but the electricity it sparked left us both frozen in that brief, suspended moment. We laughed nervously at something trivial, but the air between us hummed with more than amusement. For a heartbeat, I allowed myself to imagine that this, her hand in mine, the soft closeness, the unspoken understanding, could be the start of something neither of us could deny. And in that moment, I realized that maybe the heart didn't care about rules, only about connection. A soft sigh escaped her lips as she leaned back slightly, and our hands lingered near each other, suspended like a promise neither of us was ready to voice aloud. The soft hum of the city outside felt distant, like a world that existed without consequences. Inside, it was just Marissa and me, or at least it had been, until a sudden knock at the door shattered the fragile bubble. My heart skipped, and I could see her jaw tighten, a subtle twitch that told me she didn't want to deal with interruptions tonight. "I'll get it," she said, her voice calm but her hands trembling slightly as she moved toward the door. I wanted to stop her, wanted to insist I handle it, but she shot me a look that froze me in place. Whatever it was her boundary, and I knew better than to cross it. She opened the door, and a tall man stood there, smiling in a way that made my stomach twist. Her ex-husband. I felt my pulse spike, heat rising to my ears. The casual confidence she had carried moments ago seemed to waver, just a fraction, and suddenly the air felt electric, charged with every word unspoken between us. "I didn't expect anyone tonight," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "Just passing by," he replied smoothly, but I could hear the tension, the curiosity, the underlying scrutiny. I could tell he was sizing me up in a way that made my chest ache. This was dangerous. This intrusion threatened everything delicate between us. I sank slightly into the sofa, trying to appear invisible, yet every nerve in my body screamed for me to stand, to protect her, to stake my claim even if I had no right. She closed the door after a brief exchange, leaning against it with a faint sigh, the kind that carried relief and lingering anxiety all at once. "Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low, careful. She nodded but didn't look at me, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. That vulnerability, the way she allowed herself to feel, even briefly, drew me closer despite the fear gnawing at me. I wanted to reach out, wanted to pull her into my arms, but the moment felt too charged, too dangerous. Yet, the attraction was a living thing, impossible to ignore. Our knees brushed under the sofa, subtle contact that sent sparks dancing along my skin. My hand itched to move toward hers, to feel the warmth, to erase the distance that circumstances demanded. She shifted slightly, her gaze meeting mine, a flicker of longing there before she quickly looked away. I could sense her internal struggle, the tug between desire and restraint, the history she carried, and the ghosts of what she'd promised herself she wouldn't risk again. And I had my own demons, my own fear of stepping too far, too fast, yet unable to resist the pull toward her. For a heartbeat, we sat there, suspended between courage and hesitation, each second stretching, thick with unspoken emotion. Then she moved just a fraction closer, and our shoulders touched. It was a subtle shift, almost accidental, but the current that passed between us was undeniable. My chest tightened, my breath hitched. I wanted to close the distance, but a part of me knew we were skating on a knife's edge, and one wrong move could unravel everything. And then, just as I leaned in, daring to imagine the impossible, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, her eyes widening slightly. Whatever message it was, it pulled her attention away from me, but I caught the way her lips parted, The way her expression softened, and I realized, with both thrill and dread, that the night was far from over. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the space between us charged with electricity I could no longer ignore. Marissa sat across from me, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater, eyes darting toward the window as if looking for an escape. I could see the conflict written across her face, the battle between what she wanted and what she thought she should allow. And every flicker of emotion made my chest pound faster. I tried to speak, to bridge the gap, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I let my gaze linger on her lips, imagining how soft they might feel pressed against mine. I could feel the heat in my own cheeks, the rise and fall of my heartbeat, and I knew she felt it too. There was no hiding from it now. Desire hung between us like a storm cloud, threatening to break. Then the sound of laughter drifted from the apartment next door, a reminder that the world existed outside this charged bubble. My pulse stuttered as jealousy surged unexpectedly, sharp and uncontrollable. Not at anyone in particular, just at the thought of anyone else claiming even a fraction of what my heart already wanted. Marissa noticed my expression, her brows knitting together in quiet concern. "You're tense," she said softly, almost a whisper. "I can't help it," I admitted, my voice rough. "Being here with you, everything, it's driving me crazy, and I don't know how to stop it." Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw a flicker of fear, or maybe longing, flash across her features. She leaned back, as if trying to put space between us, yet the distance was illusory. Every muscle in my body wanted to close it, to touch her, to prove that I wasn't just some foolish boy playing at love. "I shouldn't," she started, then faltered. The words trailed off, but I knew what she meant. Society, expectations, the ghosts of her past. All the reasons she shouldn't feel what she clearly did. And yet, in the silence, in the way her lips parted slightly, I could see that every restraint was cracking. I leaned forward instinctively, my hand hovering near hers on the sofa. A breath, a heartbeat, and I could feel her tension mirroring mine. Our eyes locked, an unspoken confession passing between us. Desire, fear, excitement, vulnerability, all tangled together in a knot neither of us could untangle. I wanted to close the gap, to tell her that it was okay to want, that it was okay to feel, that I was willing to take the risk for her. But the moment was fragile. One wrong move, one misstep, and everything could shatter. The apartment felt unbearably silent. My fingers itched toward hers, and I swear I could feel the electricity in the air intensify with every second. Marissa's breath hitched slightly, and I leaned a fraction closer, drawn by a gravity I had no control over. And then, just as my lips were about to brush the space between us, the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the lock froze me mid-motion. Our eyes snapped to the door, and in that instant, the world outside collided violently with the fragile bubble we'd been inhabiting. The sound of the door unlocking was like a gunshot in my chest. Marissa and I froze, the space between us crackling with tension as the apartment door swung open. But it wasn't her ex-husband. It was Alex, my roommate, grinning too widely, holding a bag of groceries as if nothing was unusual. "Hey, didn't expect anyone here," he said, oblivious to the charged silence. Marissa's expression shifted instantly, alarm, embarrassment, and something else I couldn't place, while my heart sank. Alex had always been nosy, always poking his nose into every corner of my life, and I suddenly realized just how dangerous this moment had become. "I didn't hear you come in," I stammered, trying to mask the heat in my chest. Alex dropped the groceries on the counter and looked at us like a detective connecting dots. "You two are acting weird." He raised an eyebrow, a teasing smirk playing on his lips. "Like, couple weird." Marissa's cheeks flushed pink, and I felt a mix of panic and frustration. We'd been so careful, and yet here was Alex, unknowingly threatening to pull the curtain back on something neither of us was ready to reveal. We're not," I started, but my voice failed me. Her hand brushed against mine briefly, subtle but deliberate, and in that instant, my resolve wavered. I wanted to pull her close, to tell Alex to back off, to confess everything, but the risk felt terrifying. The attraction between us, once an intimate secret, now felt exposed, vulnerable to scrutiny and judgment. Alex tilted his head, his gaze lingering on us a moment too long. Seriously, man, I think she's, I don't know, special for you or something. His tone was teasing, but there was a dangerous undertone, a seed of awareness that could grow into suspicion. Marissa's lips parted, but she didn't speak. I could see the panic in her eyes, the internal battle between wanting to confess, wanting to retreat, wanting to protect both of us. I wanted to reassure her, to say, I'm here. Whatever happens, we'll handle it. But the words caught in my throat, trapped by the weight of possibility. Alex finally wandered into the living room, unpacking groceries, oblivious yet fully present, leaving us suspended in silence. The moment of intimacy we had been inching toward, the near kiss, the shared confessions, felt further away than ever, like it was just out of reach, dangling over a precipice we weren't ready to cross. My chest tightened. The stakes had changed. What had been a private tension, a hidden desire, was suddenly exposed to the world. One misstep, one careless word, and everything could unravel. Marissa's carefully guarded heart, my fragile bravado, the delicate connection we had nurtured. And yet, as she shifted closer to me on the sofa, just enough for our knees to brush again, I felt the undeniable pull, the gravity of this bond that refused to let us go, even when everything seemed poised to collapse. The thrill, the danger, the forbidden allure of it all was intoxicating. I leaned slightly forward, daring her to meet my gaze, daring both of us to ignore the world outside for just a heartbeat. And in that suspended, fragile moment, I realized that nothing could remain the same, and that sometimes the greatest risks are the ones worth taking. The apartment felt smaller than ever, the air thick with tension, secrets, and longing. Marissa and I sat just inches apart, her hand brushing against mine again, a tentative connection that somehow felt both impossibly fragile and unbearably real. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the same battle I had been fighting inside myself. Desire versus caution, hope versus fear. Alex, she murmured, almost to herself, and I knew she was thinking about the intrusion, the exposure, the risk we had taken just by being here, being together. I reached for her hand, letting our fingers intertwine fully this time, refusing to let go. We can't just pretend this isn't happening, I said, voice low but firm, my thumb brushing over her knuckles. I can't stop feeling this, feeling you. And I don't want to. Her eyes softened, vulnerability spilling into the gaze she had been guarding so carefully. She leaned slightly closer, as if the distance between us was too much to bear. I know, she whispered, voice trembling. I've tried to tell myself. I've tried to. She broke off, biting her lip, and I knew she was admitting, finally, that she wanted this just as much as I did, despite the risks, despite the age difference, despite everything that screamed we shouldn't. I cupped her face gently, memorizing the lines of her jaw, the softness of her cheek. I don't care about the risks, I admitted. All I care about is us, right now here, together. She closed her eyes briefly, a sigh escaping her lips, and when she opened them again, there was clarity, a decision settling in her gaze. Then, we do this, she said softly. We stop running from it, even if it scares us. The relief and exhilaration that surged through me was almost overwhelming. I leaned closer, our foreheads touching, our breaths mingling. The tension, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it condensed into this singular, electric moment. And for a heartbeat, it felt like the world had contracted until it was just the two of us, suspended between possibility and risk, love and consequence. Yet, even in that closeness, there was an unspoken acknowledgement. This was only the beginning. There would be challenges, judgment, whispers, doubt. But we had chosen to face it together. We had chosen truth over silence, love over fear. Her lips hovered near mine, a whisper away from the kiss that would change everything. My heart hammered in my chest, every instinct screaming to close the distance. And then, a soft knock at the door echoed through the apartment. We froze, breath caught, and our eyes met. The world intruded again, a reminder that life beyond this fragile bubble was waiting. But something had shifted irrevocably between us. Whatever happened next, we had crossed a line, laid our hearts bare, and understood one another in a way that could never be undone. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, my fingers lingering, and whispered, No matter what happens, I'm here. Her hand squeezed mine, and in that small, powerful gesture, I knew everything had changed. The moment was theirs, yet still suspended, poised on the edge of what was about to unfold. And for the first time, the uncertainty didn't feel terrifying. It felt like hope. The apartment was quiet now, the earlier tension replaced by a softness that felt almost unreal. Marissa and I sat side by side on the sofa, hands still entwined, fingers tracing patterns we hadn't bothered to notice before. The world outside had carried on without us, but inside, time seemed to have slowed, giving us a chance to breathe, to simply exist together. We hadn't kissed. Not yet. But the weight of our feelings no longer needed confirmation. The vulnerability, the fear, the stolen glances, the near misses, they all had led to this delicate moment of understanding. I could see it in her eyes. Relief, trust, and a quiet happiness that made my chest ache. I never thought I'd take this risk, she whispered, leaning her head slightly against my shoulder. I kept telling myself it was too complicated, too risky, but you made it feel simple. I laughed softly, brushing my hand over hers. Simple? Maybe. But worth it? Absolutely. For a long moment, we sat in silence, letting the city hum beyond our walls, letting the electricity of what we shared settle into something tender and real. The age difference, the societal expectations, even the opinions of friends, they no longer mattered. What mattered was that we had chosen to be honest with ourselves, to allow ourselves to feel fully, without apologies. I glanced at her, at the subtle smile playing on her lips, at the warmth radiating from her presence, and felt a gratitude so deep it left me speechless. She had lived through heartbreak, disappointment, and fear of taking chances. And now, somehow, here she was, allowing herself to take one more chance. On me, on us. You think we'll be okay? She asked softly, eyes searching mine. We will be, I said firm. Not because it'll be easy, but because we'll face it together. Every obstacle, every doubt, we'll handle it. You and me. Her hand squeezed mine, a gentle affirmation of trust and connection. The unspoken promise between us was stronger than any words, more powerful than any hesitation. And in that quiet, shared understanding, I realized something. Love isn't about perfection, timing, or logic. It's about courage. The courage to open your heart, even when the world tells you not to. We leaned back, shoulders touching, hands intertwined, and let ourselves simply be. No grand declarations, no dramatics. Just two people who had found each other in a way that was real, raw, and impossible to ignore. And yet, even as peace settled over us, a part of me knew the world outside still waited. Challenges, judgments, the whispers we couldn't control. But for now, it didn't matter. For now, we had this. The closeness, the understanding, the shared heartbeat of a new beginning. As I looked at her, I couldn't help but wonder, will we dare to take the next step? Will the world allow what we've found? Or will we have to fight for it every single day? And in that moment, I realized I didn't care, because I had her, and that was more than enough to make every risk worthwhile. 10.